So, as you all should remember, if anyone actually watches this, Kamen Rider does occasionally, or every summer, not counting the plague, puts out a movie. In this case, Kabuto's summer movie, Godspeed Love. And it's another one of the classic early Heisei era what if movies in an alternate timeline. In this case, the movie asks, what if the meteor that smashed in Shibuya in 99 was bigger? What happened as a result of that massive, near-Earth destroying collision? Well, as a result, most of Earth's water has dried up and the planet has become decimated. It's basically Mad Max post-apocalypse with Kamen Riders and worms all over the place. In this apocalypse, obviously the worms attacked, and humanity still created the Zectors as a way to fight against them, as in the main series. Although, the worms, in this case, don't need to be infiltrators. They have raw numbers this time around, and could just bum rush most people, although we really don't get to see any big worm fights outside of the intro. Outside of that, it's just rider on rider fights over who gets control over Zect. Oh right, let me explain. In the modern day, Zect has split into two factions. Classic Zect, a shady organization who are still very shady, and Neo Zect, a group who wants to fight for their freedom against Zect because they don't want the organization to get more powerful. In the middle of this, literally, comes walking Tendo Soji, who appears and asks whoever wants to bid on his services for him to fight for their side. So, classic Tendo Soji, without any clue about where this man came from, how he has a rider belt or the Kabuto Zector. He's just here now, and he's saying, I fight for paycheck. But he has a secret plan. A plan that doesn't make that much sense in hindsight. Anyway, the entire movie is framed around Zect's big plan to try to save the Earth. To use a space satellite, or space weapon that they created, and summon a meteor that they can destroy and steal the water from. I don't 100% know if that would be the smartest idea because the water might be radioactive, but, the giant tube that they're bringing the water through might be a giant filtrator? So I'm not 100% sure, although this doesn't really matter anyway. But yeah, their plan is to bring back the Earth's oceans and potentially save the world with this meteor. But just when their plan goes off, a giant meteor shows up behind the comet and threatens to finish the fight that the first one didn't in 99. And, obviously, because why else turn up the Ultra Screwed, this meteor is essentially a giant worm nest full of eggs that'll hatch when they crash and, help the worms fully overtake the Earth and slaughter humanity. And so what's Tendo's secret plan to stop all of this? He's, in particular, searching out for one person. A mysterious golden rider who's one of the movie exclusive riders in this series, who's carrying the key that can save humanity. And that's basically the movie. Pretty lackluster in terms of its overall plot. Now, here's a question. Why is this movie called Godspeed Love? Well, it's pretty close to a love story. I mean, not exactly there, but hey, it's almost there. In this universe, Hiyori and Kagami are dating. Also, Hiyori can emote. And a big plot point is the fact that Kagami wants to marry her. And just in time for Tendo to stumble into their life, it's revealed that Hiyori doesn't have that long left to live. And it's honestly pretty sad. Probably the only emotional beat this movie gets, because of reasons. So, another big thing with this movie in particular is that it has 3 movie-exclusive writers, all based around beetles. I forget their names, except for the last one, Caucasus, who's the golden writer of the movie. And his whole thing is, he has the hypersector. I didn't mention in the last video because I want to talk about it here. The hypersector is the weapon that Kabuto uses to achieve his hyper form, which is the final form he has for the series, allowing him to use hyper clock up. Hyper clock up is incredibly broken. So basically, the entire movie, Kabuto's trying to find Caucasus in order to get the hypersector from him. Why does he need the hypersector? Because it's his plan to save the world. Because using the hypersector, Hyper Kabuto can travel back in time with the meteor hurtling towards Earth, rewrite the future by crashing two meteors into each other, this new one and the one from 99, and only letting a small shard of the original mass, and I'm assuming a much smaller number of worms, crash into the Earth in Shibuya, thus creating the Shibuya incident in the original series. Yes, this movie, despite being a what-if scenario, is canon. It's a prequel to the series. That's kind of amazing. If you want further proof, it's a prequel down on Earth in the middle of Shibuya after the meteor crashed. Future, or alt universe, Tendo finds his younger self trying to save Hiyori, because Hiyori is actually his sister, but not really because she's a worm. It's interesting. Anyway, yeah. He's trying to save her from the rubble that's collapsed in on her. It doesn't have the strength to, but as we see in the proper timeline, he does have a rider belt at the time. So where does he get his rider belt from? Well, as it turns out, his alternate universe older self, who was already Kabuto, traveled back in time and gave him his rider belt, which he would use to go which he would carry with him into the future and become Kamen Rider Kabuto. This movie is a prequel that's canon to the main series, and I honestly thought it would be deeper, but I keep forgetting these movies are literally only TV specials that were played in theaters that have cinematic quality to them. Yeah, I have to remember that before I get my hopes up about these movies. So, yeah. This movie is only just okay. Like, I really did want to like it more, but it's pretty light on basically everything. If I have to give any compliments, I will compliment the effects work that the movie has, because the fight scenes are always, and I repeat, always on point. But outside of that, the plot's pretty bare bones. I do like the Kagami and Hiyori stuff, but it's only a third of the movie, and even by then a fraction of a third at that point. The fact that this is a prequel that's canon to the main series in its own special way is kind of mind-blowing when you get to the end of it. But this movie is pretty bare bones. It does explain where the hypersector actually comes from in the series, because it's this alternate universe hypersector, because of reasons around the hypersector debut episode that I won't talk about. But again, overall, pretty bare bones movie, and pretty mid. It's honestly a mid one of these things. Like, if Lost Paradise was a classic, almost 9 out of 10 movie, this would be around a 5 or a 4. So, yeah. See you all next time. Hopefully with something a bit more interesting to take a bite out of.